Yobachi 2007 back at you with another one. Have you all been following this Jennifer Crumbley case? I've been watching a amount of the testimony over the past couple weeks. And just to remind you what case this is one of the many school shootings. Just to give you a couple of details on it to remind you, this was back in 2021 and in Michigan, Oxford, Michigan, where the kid had gotten a call to the office for drawing on his assignment, some guns and bullets, and talking about everybody's dead, the world is over, some stuff like that. He went to the office. They called his parents in. Parents came. They neglected to take him home, talking about they had to go back to work. And he had his gun that they bought for him and and left available to him. He had that gun in his backpack. They went back to work, left him at school with the counselor. He went back to class, and then a couple hours later, shot everybody up and killed four of the other kids. And then his parents were put on trial for manslaughter because of neglect to get him any psychological help or to notify people that he had a gun, that he possibly had access to a gun, and didn't bother to check his bag either while they were there at the school for this meeting. And so the mom went on trial first after they tried to run too. They got picked up trying to run, hiding out in the warehouse. Okay, so that's your backdrop. So now the verdict came down today for 4 counts of manslaughter against Jennifer Crumley. And before we see what happened with that, we want to take a moment to like and subscribe. Like us up here really quickly, that'd be appreciated. And let's get right back to what we are checking out here. Let's listen to the verdicts that came down in this case.
Please, read your verdict.
Individually?
Sure.
Okay. On count one of involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count two of involuntary manslaughter in regards to Tate Muir, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. On count three, as to involuntary manslaughter regarding Hannah St. Juliana, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And in count four of involuntary manslaughter against Justin Schilling, we find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Thank you for allowing me to see.
You can't believe it. Tight-lipped. Got the lip tucked in. You can see here is release, and got her lips tucked in there tightly. And she's just dismayed that she might be convicted, despite all of the evidence that would suggest that her guilt and that this would be the verdict. Now, what does this have to do with what we usually cover here at this channel? I'm glad you asked. I want you to see in Jennifer Crumley what you have with a lot of women out here that we might encounter, and how these types of women, these modern women who are disaffected from motherhood, who are boss chicks like she was, who are running everything and running their men, how they are and what you could expect out of them, as demonstrated and revealed in this trial where I followed it with Jennifer Crumley. Talk to you about disaffected mothers in the past and the harm that they cause to children, especially boys. In this case, this disaffected mother not only caused her own son to not get the help he needed when he was mentally decompensating and having obvious struggles, but she put a gun in his hand along with the father. But talking about her, she put a gun in his hand and left him to the wolves, which led to him hunting other children like wolves and killing four other children because of uh, her irresponsibility and disaffection towards him. So the evidence that all came out in trial, this is one of the classrooms at the school when the police were finally arriving to get them out. But she ignored his pleas for help. She had him living in squalor. They were basically like hoarders. She had these horses that were being boarded nearby, and she spent all her time. She'd get off work, she'd go play with the horses. She had money for that, but she didn't have money for counseling. She didn't have time to notice or care. But there's other things that you find out about the kind of wife she was. So she was testifying that she would go and meet this guy in a parking lot before work a number of times a week or once a week, whenever it was. And she had time to go do that and go screw this dude in the parking lot. When they talked about how she would text her husband throughout the day, who lost his job during COVID and never got a full-time job again and was doing DoorDash or whatever have you. And she was texting him and calling him all through the day, henpecking him to do this and do that. She didn't trust him or believe in him to do anything or to take care of any business. She ran that family, wore the pants in that family. But then when it came to the gun, their son having the gun and having access to the gun, he's like, in court, she's like, oh, I didn't really have anything to do with that. That was my husband bought that gun for him, and yeah, I don't really know about guns, and I don't really, even though she went to the shooting range with her son and shot that very gun herself. But she didn't have anything to do with it. It was all on her husband. She was leaving that responsibility to him. She didn't leave any responsibilities for anything in the house to him. She henpecked him, and she was the boss chick, and she ran everything. And this is what a lot of these women want to do. But you can see that she has no true affection as a mother or as a wife for either her son nor her husband. And when you ask them what do they bring to the table and they talk about love and support, this is what their love and support looks like. It's like no loyalty or fidelity to the marriage. Just whatever she feels and whatever she wants is always going to be priority with a woman like that. It looks like not taking any interest in her son's life. If it gets in the way of her happiness, it gets in the way of her time with her horses and her interests, that's all that matters. Not nurturing and caring for your child and attending to their mental health and well-being, and having your son have to move from room to room because it's unclean and trashed, and you don't have time to bother to deal with that because you're pursuing your happiness. This is what we hear from a lot of women. It's what makes me happy. I have to seek my happiness. I have to leave my husband and I have to leave my family for my happiness because that's what matters. And it looks like your wife throwing you under the bus if something happens and trying to pin all of the blame on you so you can go to jail for forever and ever and she can get off. This is their love and support that they bring. And then here's a representation of that. I couldn't find all those clips to replay. I wanted to have those, but I couldn't spend hours trying to dig through an hour of testimony to find this piece and that piece. But here's something else that represents how cold and disaffected a lot of these women are, and that why you have to examine the kind of woman you're dealing with. They're showing themselves to you when you're dating them, when you're first encountering them, and you have to understand what you're dealing with. Listen to this piece.
Are you a failure as a parent?
I don't think I'm a failure as a parent, but at that time, I guess I felt bad that Ethan was sad at those things, and I guess I don't know, I just felt like I failed somewhere. I don't really know how to describe it. It's just that point in time, I just kind of felt like somewhere I failed.
Do you believe there was anything, do you believe that you knew or had reason to know your son was a danger to anyone else?
No. As a parent, you spend your whole life trying to protect your child from other dangers. You never would think you have to protect your child from harming somebody else. That's what blew my mind. That was the hardest thing I had to stomach, is that my child harmed and killed other people.
Do you believe there were things you were thinking at the time, I should do this, but I'm not doing it? Do you look back and think that?
No, I don't. I mean, of course I look back after this all happened, and I've asked myself if I would have done anything differently, and I wouldn't have.
She wouldn't have. She wouldn't have done anything different. She went to the school that day with her son drawing a picture of a person with the gun shooting people and bullets spilled everywhere and saying everyone is dead, knowing he has access to a gun. She didn't even bother. She didn't tell the school officials that, nor bother to check his bag to make sure he didn't have it on him. She didn't care, and she wouldn't do anything different to keep those 4 kids from dying. Look at the cold, clinical way in which she testified. This is the way she testified for a whole hour. Just cold and calculated, and there's nothing there. And this is so many of the women that you run into. And these women we should not be having children with. We should not be having families with. These women raise damaged children because they are emotionally disaffected. They are unavailable emotionally to the children. They do not provide nurturing to their sons, to their husbands, to anyone. And they are just a problem who should be left alone to seek their self-centered interests and their self-centered desires. And you have to, again, constantly examine them and see what you're dealing with. Because this is just endemic of who she is. She's on here fighting for her life, needs to connect with the jury and try to show some emotion, something likable about her, something to make them believe she really feels bad about what happened to those kids and what she even did to her son. But no, she's going to stand her ground. These women ain't done nothing wrong. They're never wrong. They're always right. She wouldn't go back and do anything different. Shame, insult, guilt, and the need to be, even in the face of 15 years in prison, she's still going to be right. And she's not going to admit that she needs to have done anything different. This is what you're dealing with. Y'all gotta be on point with who these chicks are. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, come back for more. RIP to those children who were the victims of this cold, disaffected mother and what happened due to her lack of care for her child and lack of taking any responsibility. Yobachi 2007. I'm out.